That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help me God.
He believes that the president should have the final word, indeed the only word, on all matters within the executive branch.
Mr. President, it is time to have some checks and balances in this country.
I think it's fair to say that Cheney's lawyer, Addington, dominated Bush's lawyer, Alberto Gonzales.
He has very firmly held views and very well-grounded views on a lot of issues.
Police operators, we have the emergency. Another caller is out to World Trade Center.
Looks like a second plane has just hit.
That just exploded.
I think 9/11 is a moment of preparation meeting opportunity.
The Secret Service took the Vice President to a secure room deep under the White House.
We will probably have to be a country ruled by men rather than laws.
Did you authorize the tactics that were used against Khalid Sheikh Mohammed?
I was aware of the program, certainly, and involved in helping get the process cleared. That is, the agency, in effect, came in and wanted to know what they could and couldn't do. And they talked to me as well as others to explain what they wanted to do, and I supported it.
I've studied the Constitution as a student. I've taught it as a teacher. I've been bound by it as a lawyer and a legislator. I took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution as Commander-in-Chief. And as a citizen, I know that we must never, ever turn our back on its enduring principles for expedience sake.
Even before I had gotten to the Justice Department, I had read every previous authorization ever written by Congress in wartime and every declaration of war. That's sort of my field. It's an extremely broad statute, and it says use all necessary means to stop future terrorist attacks and to, find those responsible for the past attacks.
They saw it as completely unchecked authority for the president to take any military action anywhere in the world.
The president has broad constitutional power to use military force.
The law as they were written and the Constitution that we have gives the president a lot of power in wartime. The president is the commander-in-chief.
These decisions under our Constitution are for the president alone to make.
Are we going to restrict ourselves to reading them Miranda rights, providing them a lawyer and right to remain silent, and trying them in federal court, despite the fact that they must have knowledge of the names of al-Qaeda operatives who may be in the United States?
There was a period of time there 3 or 4 years ago when about half of everything we knew about al-Qaeda came from that one source. So it's been a remarkably successful effort. I think the results speak for themselves.
From Europe to the Pacific, we've been the nation that has shut down torture chambers and replaced tyranny with the rule of law. That is who we are. And where terrorists offer only the injustice of disorder and destruction, America must demonstrate that our values and our institutions are more resilient than a hateful ideology.
And because of my background, having been a war crimes prosecutor in Rwanda and having dealt with these issues, it was decided that I would lead an interagency group to look at this question. That put the problem on the table. How are we going to deal with them? How can we prosecute them?
Cheney wants suspected terrorists, enemies of the United States, to be held as far as possible from civilian courts and as far as possible from thick rule books and precedents under the Uniform Code of Military
President Bush has signed an order approving the use of a special military tribunal.
And it was only the latest of a series of dramatic changes.
I was just moved at the time to think that there's something not quite right about this. Even though we have the legal authorities to detain people, that maybe this isn't the right way to go about it. The circumstances and conditions of detention should be different.
Article 4 Persons protected by the Convention are those who, at a given moment and in any manner...
It wasn't a terribly easy issue, but after my own research, I concluded that for Iraqi citizens in Iraq, even if they were terrorists, that they received Geneva Convention protections. And on the way over there, he said to me, they're going to be mad. They've never been told no before. And he was right. I announced the conclusion. Gonzalez asked me 3 or 4 questions. I walked him through the legal analysis. He didn't ask me any questions after that. I received my first broadside from David Addington, and he acted with the implicit blessing of the Vice President. So all of these things made him a very, very forceful president. I was a little bit unprepared for the vehemence of the reaction.
He essentially says, are you with us or are you against us?
They're both very, very smart and very, very stubborn.
I knew that there were big problems. I thought that there were errors in some of the legal arguments, sometimes bad errors. I thought that there were extravagant and unnecessary claims of presidential power.
Its first words are, torture is abhorrent.
Torture is abhorrent both to American law and values and to international norms.
What it turned out to be was a roadmap, essentially, to the implications of the unfettered presidency that the Cheney legal team was trying to create.
Lawmakers say that signing statement defeats the purpose of the law.
Members of Congress want to know why President Bush just ignored the law.
Do you think any of those tactics that were used against Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others went too far?
I don't.
And on KSM, one of those tactics, of course, widely reported was waterboarding, and that seems to be a tactic we no longer use. Even that, you think, was appropriate?
I do.
All too often, our government made decisions based on fear rather than foresight. That all too often, our government trimmed facts and evidence to fit ideological predispositions. Instead of strategically applying our power and our principles, too often we set those principles aside as luxuries that we could no longer afford.
It's the most important thing during my time in government, and it is central to the government's counterterrorism policy, so the stakes are enormous. It was a very closely held secret. It was, very, very, very few people in the Department of Justice knew about this.
They began to spy on Americans in an unprecedented way, in a way that they never had done before, by creating a special program.
I know some have argued that brutal methods like waterboarding were necessary to keep us safe. I could not disagree more, and I categorically reject the assertion that these are the most effective means of interrogation.
And it takes a deeply unfair cast of mind to equate the disgraces of Abu Ghraib with the lawful, skillful, and entirely honorable work of CIA personnel trained to deal with a few malevolent men. Torture was never permitted, and the methods were given careful legal review before they were approved. To call this a program of torture is to libel the dedicated professionals who have saved American lives, and to cast terrorists and murderers as innocent victims. What's more, to completely rule out enhanced interrogation in the future is unwise in the extreme. It is recklessness cloaked in righteousness, and would make the American people less safe.
They serve as a recruitment tool for terrorists and increase the will of our enemies to fight us, while decreasing the will of others to work with America. They risk the lives of our troops by making it less likely that others will surrender to them in battle, and more likely that Americans will be mistreated if they are captured.
On his second day in office, President Obama announced he was closing the detention facility at Guantanamo. This step came with little deliberation and no plan.
The Supreme Court that invalidated the system of prosecution at Guantanamo in 2006 was overwhelmingly appointed by Republican presidents, not wild-eyed liberals. In other words, the problem of what to do with Guantanamo detainees was not caused by my decision to close the facility, The problem exists because of the decision to open Guantanamo in the first place.